Listen, I didn't wait for a few seconds. All right. Action, part 2. I'm not overlapping as much because with lights out, I was reading multiple parts of each chapter. And this one, these are just little one-page sections. So I'm not repeating as much. So you're probably going to lose it all if I don't remember to stop at the beginning. Action, part 2. Sergeant, the man in the front right seat, asked, "How far out of Archer did you say these people were?" From behind the wheel, the non-com replied, non-commissioned officer, "About 5 miles out of town to the southwest down the county road. Nothing much out there but scattered homes, barns, gardens, pastures, and woods. Other than planted pine and maybe hay, I didn't see a terrible lot of what I'd call real farming. If you don't mind my saying so, sir, this fellow Horn may be right." "That's not for you or I to decide," said Captain Frank Swift. "We've got clear orders from Blanding and 55,000 hungry refugees in Alachua County alone that have got to be fed. If we let this fellow Horn get away with this, it'll spread across the whole damn county and the entire effort will collapse. We're going to inventory his place and get this program back on schedule." Sergeant Nichols said, "Yes, sir," and drove on. He darkly thought to himself, "Christly way to save the nation. Wish I was back in Arkansas." The convoy of 3 Humvees and 16 troopers passed unmolested and apparently unnoticed through Archer. They saw no one on the street or in their yards, even though it was early afternoon and not raining. The sergeant shifted uneasily in his seat. "Captain, when did you join the Army?" Swift frowned slightly and replied, "In 1995, after I graduated. Why do you ask?" "Just trying to make conversation. I enlisted back in the 80s, just in time to be sent to Panama. Spent some nasty time in Haiti and like to have sweated to death in Saudi during the Gulf War. Figured we'd be for Afghanistan this year or some time, but with the impact and all, I suspect we'll be pulling out there. Here's the county road. We turn left here and it's about 5 miles to Horn's place. White house with dark green trim, barn in the back painted the same way. We'll pull up out front and have the troops deploy," the captain explained. "This Horn fellow doesn't sound like he really wants a fight. Once he sees there's 16 armed troopers surrounding his place, he'll listen to reason and you can get on with your inventory. I'm surprised you weren't able to handle this yourself, Sergeant." Nichols sighed again and said, "Yes, sir." At about 3 miles out of Archer, the road passed between a thick, mature stand of planted pine on one side and a heavy stand of oaks and tangled undergrowth on the other. The road began to bend more to the south and the trees crowded close. As they were halfway around the bend, they saw a number of pine trees felled across the road, making a barrier too high for the Humvees to climb over. A man sat on top of the trees, his hands resting on the trunks, apparently unarmed. "That's Horn, Captain," the sergeant said, "but I don't see any of his family. We're still a good 2 miles or so from his place." "Stop 100 feet in front of him, Sergeant," the captain instructed. "I'll get out and talk to him." He picked up the radio mic and spoke with the other 2 vehicles. "Have all the men get out when we stop, but keep their rifles slung. We're just going to put on a little show of force, but I don't want anyone getting hurt." The sergeant did as he was instructed, stopping short of the trees. The captain stepped out, leaving his rifle in the vehicle, and approached the man on the trees. Action, part 3. At about 10 feet, he stopped and asked, "Are you John Horn?" John replied, "I am he." "Mr. Horn, I'm Captain Frank Swift, Eastern Recovery Command. My sergeant tells me that you refuse to cooperate with the national recovery effort. I'd like to resolve this impasse." "Not at all, Captain," John replied in a light tone. "We're quite happy to assist as much as we're able in the national recovery. After all, it's in our interest as well as everybody else's. I'm just not going to cooperate in the endangerment of my family, dependents, and neighbors." "Mr. Horn, no one is going to endanger anyone, as I'm quite certain the sergeant has tried to explain to you. All we want to do is carry out our orders under the National Recovery Executive Directive so that we can keep 55,000 refugees here in Alachua County from starving. Surely you don't want to see that. We're all reasonable men here." John shook his head. "Of course I want to see the people fed, Captain, but by now You've got to know there is no way they and the resident population of the county are going to be fed on what's to be found here. We are not farmers. We don't grow crops, nor raise livestock for the market. All that we have goes to feed my family, the family we've taken in since impact, and my near neighbors. We have no surplus to share with the government, and we're not going to allow you or anyone else to forcibly take from us what we have to survive. That fly's going to die. Bam. Mr. Horn, surely the sergeant explained the experts at the Recovery HQ will only direct the requisition of your food surplus, and you will, of course, be paid for it. We're not thieves here. No one will be left to starve, nor anyone's property taken without recompense. Get my fly sweater. All right. With a sigh, his opponent responded, Captain, you and I both know that these experts at your Recovery HQ are going to figure us all subsisting on some starvation diet no better than the refugees are getting now in order to maximize the amount of surplus they can requisition. And once they've figured what they can take from us through an involuntary sale, they're going to calculate some price-controlled rate for our animals and feed far below what these commodities are currently bringing on the real market. Having done that, they'll pay those prices in paper dollars that are losing value by the day, so that when what little you'll have left us finally does run out, we'll have nothing with which to try to buy, B-U-Y, buy what little food there is left to be found in any market, price-controlled, the black market, or otherwise. In a nutshell, Captain, we're not going to cooperate. Me. Shake down your pipe and smoke it. We'll help out where we can, but not at the price of starving my family, dependents, friends, and neighbors. Swift nodded his head. Okay. Sergeant Nichols said you were a hard case, and I didn't believe him. I'll have to apologize to him for my lack of faith. Mr. Horn, allow me to speak plainly here because your intransigence has sadly delayed our program, and I'm here to get it back on track. Under the legal authority vested in this command by the National Recovery Executive Directive, they could have made it a little bit better than that. The NRED. Anyway, we have the right to inventory the livestock and grain stocks of all farmers in Alachua County. We will inventory yours, then the rest who are on our list. Since you have chosen not to cooperate, I'm afraid you leave me no choice but to resort to force. I've got 16 armed soldiers here with me, and if you do not immediately stand aside and allow us to get on with our business, I will have you taken into custody. What will it be? Decide now. John eyed the angry military officer in front of him for a moment, then spit to one side. Now spit. Captain, I don't think you understand my use of the word we in this conversation. He reached into his shirt pocket and took out an FRS radio and keyed it. Click. The sound of truck motors could be heard within seconds of a flatbed Ford and a panel van. Sound of truck motors could be heard within seconds, and a flatbed Ford and a panel van pulled out of the trees behind the Hummers and stopped, blocking the road and shoulder. The man keyed the mic again. Click, click. And armed men and women began to come forward, far enough to be visible, but not out from behind the cover of the trees. All had their rifles and shotguns pointed upwards, but in the general direction of the troops. Captain Swift, I'd really like for this not to come to violence, but these folks who are my friends, neighbors, and fellow community members are all agreed with me. We will not allow you or anyone else to take from us what we must have to survive. Not for dollars, not for anything. If you force this issue, we will use force to resist. Now, I'm not much of a military man, but it looks to me like you're surrounded. Will you reconsider your position? Horn, this isn't going to work. I've got trained men here with automatic weapons. Even if you somehow manage to take us, my HQ staff knows where I'm at, and if I don't report back soon, they'll send a reconnaissance in force to come look for me. You don't have anything that'll stand up against a helicopter gunship or armor. Tell these people to put their weapons down, and I'll forget this ever happened. I'm sorry, Captain, but I can't do that. I've done my best to get you to listen to reason, but if you intend to force this issue, then force it'll have to be. You're right. We don't have anything that'll take an Apache, but I do believe we've got enough to take you. You don't seem to be a man of much sense, so I reckon you'll order your troopers to take us into custody, or maybe even fire on us. We'll fire back, and a great many are going to get killed. Not you, though. We've all agreed not to shoot you, so you'll be able to go back to your masters at this recovery HQ and explain to them how you killed a good many otherwise law-abiding citizens in your attempt to forcibly take their food from them. You'll tell them, too, because we've made sure that several individuals who are not here are going to tell every damn soul they can find what we're here to do today and why. By this time tomorrow, I reckon you'll be getting close to a general uprising that will draw attention from all over, I think. In the distance, a siren's wail could be heard, steadily growing closer. Your call, Captain. The captain's jaw worked for a moment and then spoke. Sergeant, place Mr. Horn under arrest and take him into custody. Do the same for anyone who attempts to interfere. The sounds of the siren grew steadily louder. Sergeant Nichols and the two troopers who had gotten out of the lead vehicle were plainly reluctant to move forward. Begging the captain's pardon, sir, he said, but this may not be the wisest course of action here. Sergeant, Swift said in an authoritative tone, I am not accustomed to discussing my orders. You will take Mr. Horn into custody, or you will be relieved. Do I make myself clear? Yes, sir. Very clear, sir. The sergeant stepped forward with a look of resignation on his face. After a moment's hesitation, the two troopers began to follow. To John, it seemed as if everything had gone into slow motion. The sergeant stepped forward as if through thick molasses from 100 feet away. I'm about to get us all killed, flowed slowly through his mind. This hasn't worked at all. Behind him, Anne shouldered her rifle, sighting it on the sergeant. Robert and Lisa did as well. After a heartbeat's hesitation, the rest of the community shouldered their weapons and took aim. The soldiers began ducking for what they could cover they could find behind their Hummers and drew down on the tree line. Beads of sweat began to appear on the sergeant's forehead as he moved forward at a funeral cadence toward John. He was just drawing even with the captain when a screech of brakes from behind the barricade was heard. This is John Freed, Sheriff of Alachua County. You will all lay down your weapons. This includes you soldiers as well. Rawr, rawr.